So here's my target, let's say. It's do a personal unpacking of my value system, at least in part. So I'm a writer, and I'm a writer and a researcher and a clinician, and a professor. So those things, in maybe roughly in that order. And so that's my claim to my position in the social hierarchy. And the claim is something like, I'm competent at that, it's worthwhile, therefore I'm reasonably entitled by the rules of the game to the privileges and statuses that are associated with that position, right? As long as I'm competent. So there's a match between social demand and my ability, and as long as I'm playing the game properly, then I'm safe. That's what's keeping my emotions regulated. It's not my internal regulation. It's the fact that I can do what I say I can do. And everyone else agrees, and people value that. And that keeps me secure. That's also why I don't want too much social upheaval, because I might end up with the same skill set in a society that doesn't value those skills, and then what? Then I'm done. So I want there to be an isomorphism between my internal hierarchy of perceptual value and the social structure itself. And so this is also partly why radical claims of multiculturalism are wrong. Because at the base of things, we need to be playing a unified game so that everybody knows what everybody else is up to. Doesn't mean that diversity of opinion isn't useful, because now and then the collective claim is going to be wrong and need to be updated. And so you need some strange people around, creative people, generally speaking, who will, take things in a direction that's novel to update. But roughly speaking, we want everybody nested in the same game, and then maybe above that playing some different games. And we need that because it's the only way we can orient ourselves in the world. It's the only way we can keep a match between our expectations and our skills and our desires and what's actually expected of us in the world. There's nothing that's more harmful than for you to play the game straight, right? To do what you're supposed to do, to be a good person, and then to be punished for it instead of rewarded. Very disheartening. You want what you think to be good and right to also be rewarded by the world in that manner. And that means the structures have to be, the social structure and the psychological structure have to match. And part of the reason that we protect our cultures is so that we can protect the match between our psychological structures and our social structures and keep ourselves oriented, moving forward in the world with some positive emotion and not terrified out of our skulls. It's crucially important. It's why we'll fight to protect what we've built. It's the game we understand. And it's not something that can just be arbitrarily shifted or changed. And that's partly because the aim isn't arbitrary. The aim isn't arbitrary. This is the problem with the postmodernists and the moral relativists. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're 100 years out of date. They've got it wrong. Okay, so I'm typing. And when I'm typing, I'm moving my fingers, right? And that's not thinking. That's moving my fingers. And I don't really know how I move my fingers, but I can do it. And I can do it on a keyboard. And so I can type letters one at a time. And so you might say, well, what are you doing if you were watching me? And I'd say, well, I'm typing letters. That's my aim. So I'm pretty happy when I hit an A and an A appears. And I'm not that happy when I hit an A and an E appears and I have to backspace. A little annoyance there, right? Because I've shifted off the target. A little frustration. I fix it. That's okay. Back on track. But I'm not typing letters because, who wants to read a bunch of letters? No one. You want to read words. So I'm trying to organize the letters into words. So goal 1 is the letters nested inside goal 2, which is the words. But you don't want just random words. That's not helpful. How about some phrases? That'd be good. How about some sentences? Letters, words, phrases, sentences. Now we're starting to get into units of meaning, right? And those are directions. They're like a map. They have a point. Like a book has a point. Like a story has a point. And the point is to outline the map properly. And then not just sentences, paragraphs. And those are organizations of sentences that make the sentences make sense, and the phrases, and the words, and the letters, all nested together. And not just paragraphs, chapters, right? And then chapters nested in a whole book. And then not just the whole bloody book, because that's not enough. The book itself has to be nested in the shared literary experience of the audience. I have to assume, if I'm writing a book, that there's a certain amount of culture that we share. Because otherwise I'd have to explain absolutely everything about absolutely everything, and I can't. And so the book doesn't work unless it's in a culture that's composed of maybe 1,000 books in some sense that are widely known by all of us, even if we haven't read them. I can assume that the reader is a mechanism that can understand what I've written, and that's part of where the meaning is too. And so that's all nested together, all of that, to make it meaningful for me to sit down in the morning and concentrate so foolishly, in some sense, on moving my fingers up and down on a keyboard. Right? What's meaningful about that? Well, nothing. Who cares if I type a letter? A single letter. Yeah, well, how about a word? How about the right word? How about the right phrase? How about the right sentence? Well, every movement outward, more broadly, makes it more meaningful. And if that whole structure is coherent, then all of the small actions become associated with the meaning of all of the large-scale actions, right? I'm not just typing letters. I'm writing a book. Why? Okay, then we get broader. This is the bullseye. This is the structure of the bullseye. The center might be the letter, you know? That's one way of looking at it. That's the highest resolution thing. I got to get that exactly right. And then it's nested inside all of these other structures. Well, I'm an educator. Okay, so I'm hoping the book will be educational. Well, why? Well, because maybe it would be better for people to be educated than not to be, so that they don't have to suffer so stupidly, and so they could be less malevolent, and that the world would be a less brutal place. That would be all right. So that's part of my goal. I'm a clinician. I want to fulfill that part of my moral obligation to justify my privileged position in the social hierarchy, right? I'm a scientist. I want to test my hypothesis and see if they're correct so I can advance the scientific domain and push human knowledge a little bit farther out into the unknown, right? And I'm doing that maybe because I want to be a good person, something like that. Okay, so now we're a long ways out in the moral hierarchy. And so now we might think about, well, what does it mean to be a good person? Does that mean something? Well, you think it does. Because you know people who are good people, and you know people who aren't good people, and you make a qualitative distinction between them, and you know when you're being a good person, and when you're not, and you make a qualitative distinction between that too. So I don't think we have to have a discussion about whether or not good and bad people exist. We might have a discussion about how you distinguish between them, but that's a different issue. So here's some ideas, and this is what we'll end off with. What does a good person do? They take care of themselves. That's a good thing, you know. You don't want to be a burden to anyone else. Sometimes you're going to have to be, but most of the time, maybe it'd be better if you were a net positive, you know, and rely on people when you have to. And so that means don't be so damn useless and constrain some of your malevolence. And that's a good, meaty, bloody war to get involved in. It's not trivial. It gives you something to do when you get up in the morning. And then it might be the same with your social organization, your family. It's like your family could use some work, man. Just like everybody's family, and you might be able to help. And the company you work for, same thing. Blind, willfully blind, stupid, corrupt, going in the wrong direction. Not entirely. You know, I mean, things work pretty well for how haphazard the world is in some sense. I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic, and I'm certainly not claiming that we live in an oppressive patriarchy, but like there's work to do in most organizations. A little honesty and a little hard work on your part might straighten that thing out just a little bit, and God only knows what the consequences of that would be across time. And then, you know, there's natural worries that you might want to take care of. There's diseases to conquer, and there's children to take care of, and there's food to provide, and all of the things that go along with that, so that you could involve yourself in taming and regulating the natural world, and that would be a good thing. So there's three sources of meaning, right? Get yourself under control. See what you can do about the tyranny of culture, and see what you can do about the civilization of nature, right? That's the construction of a walled garden. That's what paradise means, to get the balance between civilization and nature right. That's your goal, so people can live in there in peace and harmony, including you. That's a good goal. And then you think, well, that's going out quite a ways, you know? You're the culture hero who's taking on your own malevolence and ignorance, the tyranny of your culture and the cruelty of nature. Great. We need more people like you. Go for it. And then maybe we can go one stage outside of that. And this is as far as I can go with it. So here's how I think we are. You know, you hear scientists talk about us as deterministic creatures. We're causal, like an alarm clock. You wind the thing up. Of course, you don't anymore. But you wind the thing up and it just ticks away, and one thing follows another. It's like we're actually not like that. You build systems of habit. So here's an example. If I go like this, that's a ballistic movement. And I have to plan that movement from here to here before I execute it, because the movement is so fast that I can't get a neural message from my hand to my brain and back to stop it once it's started. So the whole thing is deterministic. I plan it, let it go, it's deterministic. But I know how to do this. It's habit. I have a structure built in me that's deterministic. And lots of things you do are like that. Habit. Anything you practice enough, it's habit. So you're deterministic at the habit level, but you're not deterministic at the level of consciousness. Because consciousness comes into play when you're doing something that you haven't done before. And so that's interesting, because what it means is the conscious you is dealing with the world that isn't determined yet. And I would say it's actually dealing with the world of possibility, the world of potential. And it's a world we believe in. You say to people, you're not living up to your potential. And you say that to yourself too, you know, when you wake up at night and you're guilty. I'm not living up to my potential. And you don't feel good about that. And you think, well, there's potential around you that you're not exploiting. You know, and you feel bad about that too. And you should. And so it's a good source of guilt and shame. Not enough to crush you maybe, but enough to wake you up. And it's certainly not something you hope for the people that you love. It's okay. You're wasting your potential. It doesn't matter. It's like no one says that. And so we're contending with potential. And we know that because we wake up in the morning and poof, we're awake. Like the sun has risen again. We're awake. And we confront the world. And what do we confront? We confront the possibilities, the potential, and the horror of the day. Here's the things we could do. Here's the things that could go bad. Here's how we could make things go better. And you know what that is. It's usually, there's 3 or 4 things that I need to do today that I'd rather avoid. But I better do them, because if I don't do them, the world will be a worse place by 6 o'clock tonight. Right? And that's a funny thing, because the world isn't like that yet. It isn't made like that yet. It won't be made like that until you make it. And you might think, well, here's some things I could do that would be good, that would actually make the world a better place by 6 o'clock tonight. Take some effort, you know, and the willingness and some aim, but you could do that. You could make it slightly better than it was, and certainly slightly less worse than it could be. And you know that. It weighs on you, I would say, as soon as you wake up. It might be a moral burden, or it might be excitement, or it might be some combination of both. But that's certainly how you view yourself. A conscious agent, confronting what has not yet been brought into being, confronting potential, and determining the course that the world's going to take. Maybe just in your small area, but who knows how big your area is and how much what you do echoes around you. You know, we have an idea in our culture that each of us is the center of the world. That's why you're part of the sovereign state. That's why you vote. That's why the future of the state itself is dependent on your decision. Because we've decided over like a 10,000-year period that you're king. You, for whatever reasons, it's on you. Your conscious ability to be awake and to be articulate and to be clued in and to keep nature at bay and culture straight and your own malevolence under check and to combat the unknown and to transform it into something that's good. That's what you are. And you see this reflected in the oldest stories. That's the dragon myth, you know? You go out into the terrible unknown, beyond what we understand, into the unknown itself. And you confront the terrible thing that rests there, the terrible predatory, eternal predatory monster. And you can do that because that's what you're like. You're not cowering at home. You're not frozen into submission. You're out there active, and you can take it on. And as a consequence, you can attain something of substantive value, right? And that's you. That's the transformation of you, because now you're braver because you've done it, but it's also something now that you've garnered from the potential, and you can bring that back and you can distribute that into the community. That's the story of humanity. It's the oldest story we have, and it's correct.